tonight. Breaking news tonight, a Tempe homeowner recorded being blocked from entering his own property after a neighbor insisted he didn't belong there. The confrontation is now under legal review.
You're not stepping inside until you show me real verification.
That keypad isn't for you. These are the documents. This is our property.
Paperwork means nothing to me. I know who belongs and who doesn't.
It's signed, notarized, and recorded with the county. Step aside.
A family pulled up to their townhouse expecting a quiet weekend of repairs. But within minutes, a neighbor was accusing them of breaking in and calling herself the protector of the block. She had no idea the truth was about to hit her harder than she could handle. The moment that shook the entire neighborhood started in less than 5 heartbeats. Picture a warm Friday afternoon in Tempe, Arizona. The kind where the sun sits low but sharp, lighting every driveway and mailbox like a spotlight. And right at the end of South Kachina Drive, where the palm trees lean just enough to look nosy themselves, a black family pulled up to a slate-gray townhouse with a trunk full of luggage and a list of repairs they planned to tackle over the weekend. Before they even got the second suitcase onto the walkway, Aubrey Serrant power-walked across the street like a storm in human form. No greeting, no pause, no hesitation, just one sharp line thrown across the air like a warning shot. "What exactly are you doing here?" Jared Drayden had heard that tone before. The kind of tone that didn't come from concern, but from certainty. The kind that said someone had already built a story in their head and planned on forcing everyone else to live inside it. He set the duffel bag down slowly, glanced at his wife, Celine, then at their son, Kylan, who was pulling their rolling cooler out of the trunk. "We're going in," Jared said plainly. "We have work to do inside." But Aubrey didn't move. She stood right in their path, arms folded so tightly her elbows nearly touched. "This place is not for walk-ins," she fired back. "I manage this street. I keep track of what goes on here. And I know for a fact this house has short-term renters nearly every week. So I'm going to need to see proof you're supposed to be here." Celine blinked, stunned. "Ma'am, we're not renters." "Of course you'd say that," Aubrey snapped. "Anyone can say that." Her voice wasn't just firm. It was brittle, like she was one wrong word away from shattering into a full meltdown. Kylan, only 12 but already far too familiar with moments like this, quietly tapped his phone screen and began recording. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Aubrey immediately noticed. "Oh, absolutely not," she said. "Put that phone away. I'm just trying to make sure this neighborhood stays safe." "Recording is legal," Jared replied. "And right now, I think it's smart." Aubrey ignored him and stepped closer, squinting like she could identify wrongness by staring hard enough. "Where's your access code? Who sent it? Show me the message. There's a list of guests for every booking on this street. I didn't see your name on any of them." "Ma'am?" Celine repeated, trying to keep her voice even. "We're not renters. You keep saying that," Aubrey cut in. "And I'm telling you, I don't buy it. Not for a second." She whipped her phone out, pressing the screen with quick, angry taps. "I'll call the authorities right now," she threatened. "You're not stepping inside until you prove you belong here." Jared's breath tightened. Not from fear. He'd dealt with worse. But this wasn't about him. His son was watching. His wife was watching. And a woman who didn't know a single thing about them was ready to summon trouble over nothing but her assumptions. "Look," he said slowly. "We're heading inside. You may step aside." Aubrey planted her feet even harder. No, not without proof. Neighbors were beginning to peek from porches. A couple walking their dog slowed down. Another neighbor pretended to water her plants, but was clearly eavesdropping. Aubrey raised her voice even more, performing for her growing audience. "Everyone here knows I keep this area in order. If we start letting strangers walk into homes without checking them, we'll have chaos." Jared let out a short breath. "Celine, let's get the packet." Celine nodded and turned toward the car. Aubrey scoffed. "Oh, please, going to print something from the internet?" "It's the closing packet," Celine said, pulling open the passenger door. Aubrey actually laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. "Sure it is." But the moment she said that, several neighbors lifted their phones. A few whispered to each other. The tension started shifting, not away from the Draydens, but toward Aubrey herself. Kylan kept filming, quiet as ever. Jared looked back at Aubrey. "You're going to feel pretty embarrassed in about 1 minute." She crossed her arms again. "We'll see about that." But what she didn't realize was that the minute he mentioned a closing packet, the entire energy on that street had already started turning against her. Celine returned from the car with a thick folder tucked under her arm. It was one of those hefty packets that title companies hand over after a sale. Page after page of signatures, dates, disclosures, and company stamps. The kind of packet you only get when the property is yours. But before she could even flip it open, Aubrey pointed at it like it was a prop in a magic trick. "That doesn't prove anything," she barked. "Anyone can put papers in a folder." Jared sighed through his nose. "You asked for proof. This is proof." "No," Aubrey insisted, stepping closer. "I asked for verification. Actual verification. Something I can confirm. A code, a guest list, a message from the host. Something real." Kylan lowered the phone slightly and whispered, "Mom, Dad." "She's not going to stop." Celine placed a hand on his back. "Honey, it's okay. Just keep filming." Aubrey snapped in his direction. "Filming is not necessary. You're making this dramatic." "You escalated it," Jared replied. "We're just protecting ourselves." The couple walking their dog paused a few feet away. The woman whispered to her husband, her voice carrying just enough for everyone to hear. "They're the ones who bought the place on the corner, right?" "Yep," her husband said, almost too loudly. "Closed earlier this year." Aubrey whipped around. "Excuse me? Are you sure? Because I check the rental sites every week." The husband shrugged. "Pretty sure. I see their car here on weekends." Jared raised his eyebrows. "Thank you," he said, a little louder than necessary. Aubrey straightened up like a soldier who'd been caught off guard. "Well, that still doesn't mean anything. They could be helping someone break in. You don't know." The husband frowned. "Break in? With luggage?" Aubrey turned back to the Draydens. "Suitcases are a distraction. People use props. It happens." Celine blinked slowly, exhausted already. "Ma'am, what exactly do you think we're doing?" "I think," Aubrey said, enunciating each word, "you're taking advantage of a loophole and forcing your way into a property you didn't book." "And why would we do that?" Celine asked, genuinely confused. "Cheap stay," Aubrey snapped. "People do whatever it takes. I'm not stupid." The neighbors exchanged looks. The woman with the dog shook her head. "Aubrey, come on." 2 more people had wandered over by now. One leaned on her porch railing, recording. Another stood on the sidewalk, eyes wide, waiting to see where this train wreck was headed. Jared held the folder out. "You're welcome to look. These are legitimate documents." She didn't take them. She didn't even lean in. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, "You can put anything in a folder." "You already said that," Jared reminded her. "And it's still true," she shot back. Kylan whispered, "Dad, maybe just open it. Let her see?" "I could," Jared said, "but she's not interested." Aubrey scoffed. "Stop flipping this around. I am doing my job. People rely on me to keep this street safe." "Who asked you to do that job?" the woman with the dog asked bluntly. Aubrey ignored her and pointed at the keypad by the door. "What code did you use? Tell me the digits so I can check it." Jared's face tightened. "Absolutely not." "See?" Aubrey shouted. "They won't even share the code. Suspicious." Celine stared at her in disbelief. "Why on earth would we give you the door code to a house we own?" Aubrey pointed to the keypad again. "Because I track who accesses each property." The dog-walking couple shared a look of pure confusion. "You track what?" the husband asked. Aubrey hesitated, just long enough for everyone around her to realize she had absolutely no authority to track anything. Jared opened the folder. He flipped to the first page, then the second. He held up a page with the deed information printed in bold. "This is the official ownership record," he said. "Our names, our company, the closing date. It's all here." Aubrey squinted. "That could be fake." "Look closer," Jared insisted. "I don't need to," she replied, stepping back. "There are other ways to verify this, and until I confirm it myself, you're not going inside." "You're blocking the entrance," Solene said. "Move!" Aubrey stiffened. "No," Jared looked around. "Do you all see this?" The woman on the porch called out, "Aubrey, let them inside. You're making a fool of yourself." Aubrey turned red. "Mind your business." "It is our business," another neighbor said. "This is the street we all live on." Kylan kept recording, his hands steady now. "Dad, she's digging her own hole." Aubrey jabbed a finger toward him. "Point that camera somewhere else." "No," Jared said calmly. "He's fine." Aubrey lifted her phone again. "Last chance to show me something real before I get the authorities involved." "Aubrey," the man with the dog said gently, "you really don't see what you're doing right now." She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the family, her expression a mix of panic and pride, like she'd trapped herself in a story she refused to step out of. And that's when it became clear to everyone on that street that she would rather double down than admit she was wrong. The moment stretched as Jared held the deed page up, the paper catching the sunlight like a quiet truth no one could ignore. Neighbors shifted, murmuring under their breath, watching Aubrey's face tighten with every passing second. She stood there, arms tense at her sides, trying to keep control of a situation that had already slipped out of her grasp. Solene stepped forward and calmly laid a few pages across the hood of their SUV. "Here," she said. "If you won't take the folder, at least look at the documents laid out." Aubrey didn't move. She stared at the pages like they were part of a trap she wasn't going to fall into. "I'm not touching anything," she announced. "If those papers are real, I'll confirm it myself. I don't need you to show me." "Confirm it how?" Solene asked, tired but still patient. Aubrey pressed her lips together. "I have ways." The woman on the porch couldn't help it. She laughed. "Aubrey, you don't have any ways. You don't work for the county." Aubrey snapped back. "I don't need a job title to care about this neighborhood." "But you do need one to interrogate people like this," the dog-walking husband said. A small crowd had formed by now, 8 or 9 neighbors standing at different angles, some filming, others watching with crossed arms and irritated frowns. The tension wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud enough to feel in the air. Jared set his hand on the open packet. "This is our property, purchased through our company. Everything is legitimate." Aubrey stepped closer, not to look at the papers, but to loom. "If it's yours, then why haven't I seen you on the block before? Why didn't anyone tell me this place sold?" "You're not the neighborhood gatekeeper," Solene replied. "People don't need to report their lives to you." That line hit harder than anyone expected. Aubrey flinched like she'd been struck. "I monitor this street," she insisted, her voice shaking with a strange mix of anger and embarrassment. "I've done that for years. Everyone knows that." "No one asked you to," another neighbor said. "You just started doing it." Aubrey swallowed. "And I'm good at it." Jared took a slow breath. "We came here for a simple weekend of repairs. We're not here to fight you. We're not here to cause any trouble. But you're blocking our front door." Her eyes darted toward the keypad again. "Give me the code, and I'll let you pass." "I'm not giving you a private code to a property you do not own," Jared said firmly. A few neighbors nodded. Someone whispered, "What is she thinking?" Aubrey turned toward the small audience. "I'm trying to protect all of you. You act like I'm doing something wrong. But who else is checking strangers? Who else is tracking what happens around here? If I didn't step in, who would?" Keelan's voice startled her. "Anyone except you, probably." The kid didn't look scared anymore. He looked tired. Tired in a way that only 12-year-olds who've seen their parents deal with this stuff truly understand. Aubrey pointed at him. "You need to learn some respect." "He's being respectful," Solene said calmly. "He's just telling the truth. This is ridiculous." the neighbor on the porch muttered. Aubrey, they own it. Look at the paperwork. I don't need to look, Aubrey said stubbornly. At least pretend, another neighbor added. You're embarrassing yourself. Aubrey's cheeks reddened. She looked from face to face, realizing for the first time that the neighborhood she thought she controlled wasn't supporting her. Their expressions weren't neutral. They weren't confused. They were annoyed, frustrated, even angry. I'm not the bad guy here, she said quietly, her voice wobbling. No one said bad guy, Solene replied gently. But you are crossing a line. Aubrey shook her head. You don't understand. I've had break-ins on this street. Twice. People cutting through yards. People pretending to be guests. I've seen it. And we're not them, Jared said. We're the owners. Aubrey stared at him, and for a split second, something shifted in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or doubt, or the sudden realization that she had taken things way too far and couldn't find a graceful way out. But pride is a stubborn thing. She folded her arms again. Fine. If you're the owners, then why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't I get a message? Because, the man with the dog replied, no one sends you messages. That comment was met with quiet laughs and a few sighs. Aubrey's breathing quickened. Solene placed a hand on the pages again. Look, just look. That's all you have to do. Aubrey stepped forward slowly, but instead of examining the documents, she angled her body toward the growing crowd of neighbors. Her eyes darted across every phone pointed at her. You're all recording me? She asked, almost whispering. Someone answered from the back. Yes, because this is unbelievable. Aubrey's face flushed red again. Her hands trembled, just barely, but enough for Kylan's camera to catch it. Jared softened his voice. Please, just read the documents. Aubrey exhaled shakily and leaned in a few inches, just enough to glance at the header on the top of the page. Drayden Row Holdings, the date, the signatures, the county stamp. Her eyes flicked through the first 3 lines. Then she jerked back as though she'd touched something hot. Well, she stammered, those could still be fake. Groans rippled through the neighbors. Aubrey? The woman on the porch said. Stop! Aubrey looked around again, and the reality finally sank in. No one was backing her. Not one person. Her voice cracked. I just wanted to help. Jared kept his eyes on her. You didn't help. You harassed us. Aubrey blinked. Once, twice. The weight of her choices landed hard on her shoulders, and while her pride kept her from apologizing, the fear in her eyes showed she knew, deep down, that the situation had just shifted into something she wouldn't be able to control. By Saturday morning, the neighborhood looked calm from the outside. Sprinklers clicking on, kids on bikes, someone's grill warming up early. But the calm was fake. Underneath it, tension buzzed through every porch, driveway, and backyard on South Kachina Drive. Because the moment Aubrey stormed back home the night before, dragging her embarrassment behind her like a heavy coat, the videos started traveling. The longest clip came from Kylan's phone. The shorter ones came from 3 neighbors. Someone stitched them together and posted them in the local community Facebook group called Tempe Neighborhood Watch Circle. And once it went up, it didn't stay small. It spread into other groups, then into private chats, then into someone's Instagram story, and then into even more spaces that none of them could track. By mid-morning, Solene's phone buzzed non-stop with texts from friends who lived across Tempe. Is this you? What happened? Are you okay? She set her phone aside for a moment, but then it buzzed again, and she sighed. This is getting out of hand, she whispered. Jared was patching a section of drywall when he heard her voice crack slightly. He wiped his hands and walked over. Talk to me. She showed him her phone. People I haven't spoken to in months are sending this. They mean well, but it's overwhelming. He took the phone gently. We knew it would spread. I know, she said, but it's only been 1 day. At the kitchen counter, Keelan ate cereal while scrolling. His face stayed blank, but his eyes moved fast. People in my class are talking about it already, he said quietly. Solene sat beside him. "How are you feeling?" He shrugged, still scrolling. "I've seen comments from grown-ups saying it's fake, saying we made it up, saying we edited the video, like we had nothing better to do. That's because some folks can't admit when something ugly is right in front of them," Jared said. "They look for any reason to pretend it's not real." Keelan pushed his bowl away. "It's annoying." "We'll get through it," Jared said, rubbing his shoulder. But while the three of them tried to find a little peace inside the house they'd fought so hard to enter, the conversation outside kept growing louder. Down the street, on Aubrey's porch, the comments were hitting her from a different angle. She sat hunched in a patio chair, scrolling through endless threads, her name tagged again and again. Her messages, her audio, her face, mid-argument. It was all there, and people had opinions. Who does she think she is? She crossed the line. This is wild. She embarrassed herself. It didn't stop. Her notifications flashed so quickly they blurred. Her phone felt hot in her hand. Every few minutes, another neighbor would walk past her house slowly, pretending to check their mail or trim a plant, just to steal a glance at her. They looked away as soon as she looked up. But they still watched her from the corners of their eyes. She felt trapped, like her home, her street, maybe her whole world, had turned against her in less than a day. Inside her chest, her heart thumped hard enough to make her breathing uneven. She typed angry replies in the group, then deleted them before posting. Typed again. Deleted again. She wanted to defend herself, but nothing she came up with sounded good enough. Every explanation sounded weak. Every justification fell apart the moment she reread it, so she stayed quiet. But the silence only made her look worse. Back at the Drayden's property, around midday, someone knocked on their door. Not hard. Just a gentle, hesitant knock. Solene peeked through the window. It was the woman who walked her dog the day before. When Solene opened the door, the woman gave a small, apologetic smile. "Hi, I hope it's okay that I came by." "Of course," Solene said. "Come in." The woman stepped inside and glanced at Kylan, who was now sketching in a notebook at the table. She lowered her voice. "I wanted to say something. I'm really sorry you had to deal with what happened yesterday." "Thank you," Solene said softly. "I know yesterday was rough," the woman continued. "But a lot of us saw what happened, and we're supporting you. Not everyone thinks the way she does." Jared nodded. "We appreciate that." The woman exhaled in relief. "Also, the clip is everywhere. People are talking about it nonstop. And honestly, most of them are on your side." "We didn't want it to turn into a spectacle," Jared said. "We just wanted to get inside without being stopped." The woman looked down. "You shouldn't have had to explain yourselves at all." Just then, another buzz came from Solene's phone. She picked it up, expecting another message from a friend. But this one was from a neighbor she had never met. "Are you going to press charges?" The question stunned her. She showed the screen to Jared. "People are already asking." He put his hand on the back of her chair. "We'll talk about it later. For now, let's finish the repairs we came here to do." They tried. They really tried. They got back to fixing the loose handrail, cleaning the upstairs windows, tightening a few fixtures. But even in the rhythm of those tasks, there was a heaviness hovering around them. They kept hearing footsteps outside, quiet voices, people passing by to peek at the house. The family didn't go looking for attention, but attention had found them anyway. By late afternoon, even more screenshots, rumors, and shaky stories had appeared online. Some exaggerated the confrontation. Some twisted it. Some treated it like entertainment. But there were also messages, private ones, from residents who thanked them for standing up to her, who admitted they'd been too scared to confront Aubrey in the past, who said seeing someone push back gave them courage they didn't expect to find. That surprised Solene. But they were only halfway through the weekend, and the situation was still shifting. And as the video kept gaining momentum, the pressure around the Draydens, and especially around Aubrey, was building toward something neither side could ignore much longer. Sunday morning came with a heavy kind of quiet. Not peaceful, not comforting, just the sort that hangs in the air when too many people are thinking about the same thing, but not saying it out loud. The Draydens had barely slept. Every time one of them reached for their phone, there were more messages, more clips, more strangers chiming in as if they'd lived on South Kachina Drive their entire lives. Jared sat at the dining table with a mug of coffee, but he wasn't drinking it. He kept scrolling through comments, shaking his head little by little. People online are debating our entire existence, he said. Half of them are trying to explain why this wasn't what it clearly was. Celine joined him, tying her hair back. It feels like they're turning our lives into a story, she murmured. And not even an accurate one. Keelan, still in his pajama shirt, sat across from them and pushed his glasses up. Mom, someone made a meme of her yelling at us. Jared winced. Great. That's the last thing we needed. But while the Draydens were dealing with a flood of attention they never asked for, Aubrey was drowning in a very different storm. Inside her house, blinds drawn, she typed furious paragraphs into the community Facebook thread only to delete every single one before hitting send. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. Her throat felt tight. She replayed the confrontation again and again in her mind, twisting the details, trying to convince herself she meant well. But each time she nearly reached a justification, she would remember the way her neighbors looked at her afterward. Not confused, not supportive, disappointed. She had spent years giving herself the title of protector of the block. But now she felt like the whole street was ready to cross her name off the map entirely. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. Ma'am, this is not a threat, but you may want to consider apologizing before this escalates further. Aubrey dropped the phone onto the couch as if it had shocked her. Escalates? She whispered. What does that mean? She didn't know yet, but she was about to. Back at the townhouse, Jared finally closed his phone and rubbed his hands over his face. We need to talk about something, he said quietly. Something real. Celine sat up straighter. What is it? We've been patient, calm, respectful. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't insult her. We didn't provoke anything. But she put us in a situation that could have gone very differently if someone else had shown up, or if we hadn't stayed composed. Keelan nodded. She tried to block the door. She kept ignoring everything we said. Celine let out a long breath. So you're saying? I'm saying she crossed boundaries most people don't even think about crossing, Jared said. And she kept doing it even when she had multiple chances to stop. The dog-walking couple arrived a moment later, knocking gently. Jared opened the door. Sorry to bother you again, the woman said, but I heard something, and I figured you should know. What is it? Celine asked. There's talk in the group, the woman continued. People are worried she'll try to twist the story again. Some are defending you. A few are defending her. And there's a rumor going around that she plans on filing a complaint. Against you. Kylan blurted. For what? Existing? The woman didn't laugh. I don't think she knows what she's trying to accuse you of. She's just desperate to salvage her image. Jared leaned against the doorframe. We didn't do anything wrong. I know, she said. Everyone who saw the video knows. The couple left soon after, and when the door closed, the house felt even heavier than before. Silence stretched across the room until Celine finally broke it. I'm tired of letting this slide, she said. I'm tired of pretending it didn't shake us. I couldn't sleep at all last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Jared took her hand. I know. And what if she does this to someone else? Celine continued. What if next time she stops a teenage boy who's alone? Or someone who doesn't stay calm? What if she escalates and no one else is around to record it? Kylan shifted uncomfortably. She scared me, he admitted. I didn't say anything, but she did. Celine pulled him close. That's exactly why we can't ignore this. Jared didn't argue. He walked to the counter, picked up the deed packet, and tapped the edge against his palm. We handle this the right way, he decided, through an attorney. They drove to a local law office later that afternoon. The attorney, a calm woman named Lydia Aronson, listened intently as they explained the full situation. From Aubrey blocking their access to her, threatening to call authorities, to the ongoing online harassment. When they finished, Lydia leaned back in her chair. "She crossed several lines," she said. "The fact that she blocked your entrance, demanded private information, and continued accusing you after being shown proof, that's serious. And with the video evidence, you have a strong case." Solene swallowed. "We're not trying to ruin her life. We just want accountability." Lydia nodded. "Accountability doesn't ruin lives. Behavior does." Keelan sat taller. "So what happens now?" he asked. "I can file a civil claim," Lydia said. "Harassment, interference with property access, and defamation based on what she continued saying afterward. If you decide to move forward, it will be official." Jared looked at Solene. "Do you want to do this?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, I do." Kylan nodded too. "Me too," Jared exhaled. "Then we do it." Lydia smiled gently. "I'll prepare the paperwork." Meanwhile, across the Meekham Street, Aubrey stared at her phone as a notification popped up in the neighborhood group. "Anyone know why the Drayden family was at a law office today?" Her stomach dropped. She read it again, and again. Her hands shook. "No," she whispered. "No, they wouldn't." But they would, and they had. And as the reality sank in, she realized she wasn't just dealing with embarrassment anymore. She was standing at the edge of consequences she could no longer outrun. Monday arrived with the kind of nervous energy that clings to a neighborhood after a public blow-up. The Tucson sun rose early, washing the rooftops and sidewalks in a pale gold light. But not even the brightness could soften the weight sitting over South Kachina Drive. Too many people had watched the confrontation. Too many had shared the video. Too many had seen the attorney's name pop up in the community thread. The story wasn't gossip anymore. It was real. Inside her house, Aubrey stood in the middle of her living room, staring at the envelope slipped under her door. The return address belonged to the same law office she saw the Draydens walk into the day before. Her hand hovered above the envelope, but she couldn't bring herself to open it. She already knew. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears as she paced back and forth across the rug. "This is all a misunderstanding," she whispered to herself. "I was trying to help. They're twisting everything." She stopped, gripping the edge of a table. Why would they go this far? But deep down, beneath the panic, beneath the embarrassment, she knew exactly why. She had crossed into their lives without invitation, without thought, and without the slightest consideration for how her assumptions might impact them. She finally tore the envelope open. The letter didn't shout. It didn't insult. It didn't mock. It simply laid out the facts. The civil claim for harassment, interference with property access, and the damage caused by her ongoing accusations. Aubrey sank onto the couch. The letter trembled in her hands. For the first time since the confrontation, she felt something she never would have admitted out loud. Regret. Meanwhile, just down the street, the Draydens stepped out onto their own porch. The air still felt heavy, but there was a sense of clarity between them. They weren't celebrating. They weren't gloating. They were simply standing in the truth of what had happened. Solene glanced at the street, noticing a few neighbors watching from their driveways. Not with suspicion, just curiosity. She offered a small wave. A few waved back. Jared closed the door behind them and leaned against the railing. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Me neither," Solene said. "But I'm relieved we did something." Kylan sat on the top step, elbows on his knees. "Do you think she's scared?" "Yes," Jared answered. "But that's not the point. This isn't about scaring her." "What is it about?" Keelan asked. Solene looked at him and replied, "Making sure she doesn't do this to another family, to someone who might be alone, or someone who might not handle it safely. This isn't just about us anymore." Kylan took a moment to let that sink in, then nodded. "Okay, that makes sense." As they spoke, the woman who owned the dog approached with her morning coffee. She stopped at the foot of their steps. "Hey," she said softly. "I heard some paperwork went through." Jared nodded. "It did. I know this whole thing has been a mess," she continued. "But I want you to know a lot of people here support what you're doing. Really. Some of us stayed quiet for too long when she pushed her weight around. Maybe we shouldn't have." Solene stepped forward. "We're not trying to make enemies." "You're not," the woman assured her. "You're drawing a line. And honestly, someone needed to." A few more neighbors waved from afar. People who didn't know the Draydens well, but were suddenly seeing them in a different light. Not as newcomers, not as strangers, as part of the community. Later in the day, as the sun dipped lower and the heat softened, Jared stood inside the house and looked out the window. He could see Aubrey pacing her living room through the sheer curtains, but he didn't stare. He didn't smirk. He simply watched the way she moved. Lost. Frantic. Overwhelmed. "We ruined her," Kylan murmured behind him. Jared shook his head. "No. Her actions created this, not us." "But we pushed back," Keelan said. "That's what people have to do sometimes," Jared replied. "If you never speak up, nothing changes. Ever." Across the street, Aubrey finally collapsed into her chair. The letter crumpled in her lap. She didn't know if she should apologize, stay silent, or pack her things and leave the neighborhood altogether. Every option felt like a mountain. Every choice felt like losing. For the first time, she understood that the day she marched toward the Draydens with accusations, she wasn't guarding her street. She was guarding her assumptions. And it cost her more than she ever expected. Back at the townhouse, Solene closed the windows and drew in a deep breath. "I think we learned something too," she said quietly. "What's that?" Jared asked. "That speaking up doesn't always feel good," she replied. "Sometimes it feels heavy and uncomfortable, but it's necessary. We teach people how to treat us by what we allow." Kylan sat at the counter, tapping lightly on his phone. "I hope other people watching the video learn that too." Jared placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "They will, and you'll be part of the reason why." The family gathered their tools and supplies, ready to finish the work they came to do. The repairs suddenly felt different. Not like chores, but like the beginning of something steadier, stronger, something theirs. Outside, the neighborhood watched in quiet reflection. Some relearning, some unlearning, and some finally understanding that assumptions can become weapons and respect can become a shield. The story of that weekend would move through the community for months, reshaping conversations, challenging comfort zones, and reminding everyone on South Kachina Drive that judgment has a price. Now comes the moment for your viewers. If you followed this story to the end, share it, talk about it, and think about how quickly we judge people before knowing anything about them. Stories like this aren't entertainment, they're reminders. And if you want more stories that challenge perspectives and highlight truth, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next one.